He was just a boy when the world first whispered his name. Born in 356 BCE, in the ancient city of Pella, Macedonia, Alexander was destined for greatness. His father, King Philip II, was a ruthless conqueror who united the fractured Greek city-states through blood and steel. But even Philip saw something more in his son, something terrifying. Alexander wasn't just a prince, he was a prodigy. Taught by none other than Aristotle himself, he learned philosophy, science, politics, and the art of war. While other boys played with sticks, Alexander studied the strategies of Achilles, memorized Homer, and dreamed of empires. At the age of 12, he tamed a wild stallion. No man could ride the legendary Bus. That day, Philip turned to his generals and said, "Macedonia is too small for you, my son. You must seek a world to conquer." And so he did. In 336 BCE, tragedy struck. King Philip II, powerful, feared, invincible, was assassinated. Some say it was a jealous bodyguard. Others whisper it was Alexander's own mother, Olympias, who pulled the strings from the shadows. Either way, the crown now rested on the head of a 20-year-old boy. The Greek world watched closely, expecting chaos. A young, untested ruler. The perfect time to rebel. But Alexander moved like lightning. He crushed revolts in Thebes, Athens, and Thessaly before they even fully formed. In a show of brutal power, he destroyed Thebes, entirely minus 30,000 people enslaved. The city razed to the ground. The message was clear. This is not a boy king. This is a storm wearing a crown. With Greece silenced, Alexander set his eyes on a far greater enemy, Persia, the greatest empire in the world. Many called it madness, but Alexander, he called it destiny. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hellespont with 40,000 men. It was more than just a military move. It was a declaration of war against the most powerful empire on earth, Persia. At the river Granicus, he faced his first real test. The Persian forces were waiting, outnumbering his troops and holding higher ground. His generals advised caution, a night attack, maybe a retreat. But Alexander was never one to wait. He mounted his horse, Bucephalus, pointed his spear, and charged straight into the river. His army followed, and chaos erupted. Persian blades clashed against Macedonian shields. Arrows rained down. Horses screamed. Men died. But Alexander, always at the front, cut through their lines like a god of war. He nearly died, struck in the helmet by a Persian noble, but his comrade Cletus the Black saved him in the nick of time. When the dust settled, Alexander stood victorious. The Persian front had shattered. Cities along the coast began surrendering one by one, choosing allegiance over annihilation. But this was just the beginning. The real enemy still waited in the east. King Darius III, ruler of Persia. And Darius would not go down without a fight. In 333 BCE, the two titans finally clashed at the Battle of Issa. Alexander, young and fearless, led an army of roughly 40,000. Darius commanded over 100,000 Persian warriors, bolstered by elite cavalry, archers, and war chariots. The odds were staggering, but Alexander was undeterred. The battle began in a narrow coastal plain, which neutralized the Persian advantage in numbers. It was a masterstroke. Alexander had chosen the battlefield perfectly. With the sun rising behind him, he gave the signal. His phalanx advanced a wall of sarissas, iron, and discipline. Then came Alexander himself, leading a devastating cavalry charge on the right flank. His goal was simple: strike directly at the heart, Darius. As Macedonian steel tore through Persian lines, Darius panicked. For the second time in history, a Persian king fled the battlefield, abandoning his soldiers, his treasury, even his own family. Alexander had won not just a victory, but a legend. The Persian army crumbled, and Alexander captured Darius's mother, wife, and children. Yet, in a display of rare mercy, he treated them with the utmost respect as royalty. Even Persia's enemies admired his code of honor. Now, the road to the Persian capital lay wide open. City after city fell. Tyre, a fortress island, resisted and paid the price. After a brutal 7-month siege, Alexander built a causeway to reach the island, broke through its walls, and unleashed hell. Over 30,000 inhabitants were killed or enslaved. It was a chilling reminder: resistance meant ruin. From there, Alexander swept south into Egypt. But Egypt didn't resist. They welcomed him as a liberator, even a god. At the ancient Temple of Amen in the Siwa oasis, priests declared Alexander the son of Zeus. Whether it was divine fate or political theater, one thing was certain: Alexander now believed he wasn't just a king, he was something more. In 331 BCE, he marched east once more, toward the heart of Persia. At Gaugamela, Darius stood waiting again, this time with an army nearly twice as large, boasting war elephants and scythed chariots. It was his last stand. The night before the battle, Alexander slept soundly. When his generals asked why, he replied, "Because we already hold victory in our hands." The next day, chaos erupted. Dust filled the air. The ground shook with the thunder of hooves and iron. But Alexander's tactics were flawless. He feigned retreat, split enemy ranks, then pierced straight through the center once more, targeting Darius. And once more, Darius fled. Persia was broken. Babylon opened its gates. Susa followed. Then Persepolis, the jewel of Persia, fell to Alexander. There, in the grand palace of Xerxes, Alexander stood among unimaginable wealth: gold, jewels, scrolls of forgotten wisdom. He had conquered the very soul of the Persian Empire. And in a moment, still debated by historians, he burned the palace to the ground. The age of Persia was over. The age of Alexander had begun. But Alexander was not done. He looked east, beyond the conquered lands of Persia, and saw another ancient power: India. In 326 BCE, he crossed the treacherous Hindu Kush mountains and the Indus River, entering a new world of jungles, rivers, and unknown kings. There, he met his fiercest opponent yet, King Porus of the Punjab. Porus wasn't like the others. He didn't run. He stood tall, proud, and prepared. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, Alexander faced an army unlike any he had seen. Thousands of infantry, cavalry, and terrifying war elephants that shook the ground with every step. The battle was brutal. Monsoon rains had turned the battlefield into a swamp. Macedonian soldiers struggled in the mud, slipping and drowning. The elephants crushed men and horses underfoot. The air was filled with screams and thunder. But Alexander, as always, led from the front. He outflanked Porus with a surprise crossing, charged the elephants with javelins and archers, and broke the Indian line after hours of bloodshed. Porus was finally captured, wounded but defiant. When asked how he wished to be treated, he replied, "Like a king." Alexander smiled and let him keep his throne. He admired Porus's bravery, and for once, perhaps, he saw not just an enemy, but an equal. But the victory came at a cost. His men were exhausted. They had marched for years, fought countless battles, crossed deserts and mountains, and now stood on the edge of the known world. When Alexander ordered them to march further east into deeper India, they refused. Even the most loyal generals begged him to stop. The army had followed him from Greece to Egypt to Persia, but now they had reached their limit. Alexander raged. He sulked. For 3 days he shut himself in his tent, silent and furious. But in the end, even the greatest conqueror in history had to yield. He turned back. If you found this story of Alexander inspiring, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more epic tales from history. This is only the beginning. Part 2 is coming soon.